Hello and welcome to the Honest Not Perfect podcast. My name is Suzanne Ellingham and I'm the director of Source Events, the platform that helps connect retailers, brands and wholesalers to manufacturers and makers globally.
And my name is Jack Stratton. I'm director of Insider Trends. We are a global retail trend spotting agency helping brands to spot what's coming next.
Welcome to Honest Not Perfect, where we sit down and talk with experts and people driving change within retail and beyond. That's change in sustainability and manufacturing, global trade, processes, circularity, everything in between. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Christina Dean, founder of Redress and the R Collective. And it's fair to say for the last 15 years, Christina's been deeply embedded in ways that we can create better ways to design, produce, repurpose, and recycle clothing, which led her into founding the R Collective, which is a social impact business that rescues, reuses and recycles fashion waste. More importantly, it's about creating responsible circular products and recycling solutions at scale. And what I love about Christina is we often, when we talk about circularity and processes, it's always usually through a UK lens and an EU-centric view, whereas Christina's been deeply embedded in Asia developing those processes. So I think we're going to cover a lot of ground, but Christina, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Christina, you've had quite a journey through circularity and sustainability to end up where you are now. Where did it start for you?
Well, it actually started at Harley Street, looking down people's mouths.
Okay, I feel like you need to explain that one.
Yeah, let's unpack. Well, actually, I'm a qualified dentist and I worked for a couple of years in London before moving to Asia, Hong Kong specifically, where I retrained as a journalist and I wrote about environmental pollution and public health because what I took from dentistry was a real passion for believing in public health as a sort of a moral imperative, a political, a governance kind of, and a corporate governance imperative that people's public health should be protected, particularly those who are marginalised. So kind of that was in my bones, and my parents are very sort of public health orientated, so I always grew up with people arguing at the table. So
that's a great thing to hear, though, not just people believe in what they see, but people who are deeply passionate about what they believe in.
Exactly. So somehow that's the hippie family that I was brought up with in public health as well. So basically, I wrote about environmental pollution and public health, and I travelled a lot around China, and I lived out there in Hong Kong and the region and Shanghai for, in total, like 15 odd years. So the point is, I wrote a lot about the textile industry in 2003, 4, 5, and I was so interested in it. And I still am this like real nerdy nerd, like teacher's pet. I'm so interested in it. And so basically I started Redress, the non-profit first in 2007, really just when fast fashion, global exports, when the fashion industry was really like, it was like catnip. Everyone suddenly started buying clothes, the pollution, the data, everyone started to work it out. And I was rightly or wrongly in the right place or the wrong place to get completely absorbed in textile issues. I'm a pig in you know what. Put me in textile waste and I'll live there forever because I'm really fascinated by it. And, coming back to the public health perspective on it, I mean, fashion and pollution is so complicated. It affects everybody. Climate change, that's everybody. But I think for me, back in the day when I first got involved in like my heart and so my gut, it was mainly linking textile production with water pollution and soil pollution, which is kind of more real. Air is just so everywhere, so difficult.
But I feel like textile waste in particular is one of the problems that we absolutely need to solve if we're ever going to move towards being a net neutral and carbon neutral society. So tell me where it started for you with Redress in Asia. Was that born out of collaboration? Obviously deeper than your bones, you thought we need to do something about it. How do we start to make small steps?
Yeah, so Redress is now 18 years old, and in that time we've had 3 missions, all of them roughly sort of the same, but the first one was about promoting sustainable fashion, which was too broad, because what is it? We still can't decide all these
Still can't decide what sustainability means.
So
it just means everything.
So because it was rather confusing, we changed our mission 2 years in, so this is now 2009, to be reducing textile waste, because people understand that, because it's obvious. It's not sexy, but it is quite sexy for the bottom line. It depends what you're into, but
different chat.
So essentially, for a very long time, our mission was to reduce textile waste. And circularity, although it's as old as the planet, it's only quite new in the fashion industry as it is for electronics and other kind of sectors. So we then changed our mission more recently to be promoting circular fashion broadly. But that is still in a way waste reduction.
Yeah.
But it's obviously has a regenerative nature as well. So it's a more expansive, much more complicated mission that we have today. The reason why we did it in Asia, I mean, the truthful reason is that I just ended up living in Hong Kong, and that's where I started it, and that's where I saw it. But the more strategic, clever clogs answer to that is that Asia is obviously exporting the lion's share of global textiles and apparel.
80%.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit more.
We've got it at 60 to 63% roughly, but all data is dodgy in the industry, quite honestly. I don't believe anything that I read. So from an export perspective, obviously it's the powerhouse of the world, regardless if we pick your stat or mine. We can argue about that offline.
It's still a lot. I think that's the point of it. And I think I don't know where my stat came from. I think it probably came from a report somewhere. But I think when we think about global manufacturing, it's China, India. Like between the two of them, they probably do about 90% of everything.
Well, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia,
it's all
is
in
on
that
the rise.
region.
Yeah, but that's only one component. That's not. That's just the component of the production, which gives rise to a lot of pre-consumer excess. And we're talking therefore rolls, partially made garments, damaged trims, or not even damaged products and trims. So anything pre-consumer, it's all left in Asia, where there's very little infrastructure to actually deal with it. More on that in a minute. Because the other main point I want to make is that emerging markets, we're seeing obviously over the last 10 plus years that, emerging market countries have got more disposable income, so too are they buying more clothes. And even recently with the China slowdown, India now is seen as like a hot market, particularly for luxury. Korea, Japan from the more kind of mature APAC countries, Indonesia, Thailand those are emerging markets. So why do I say that? Because you've got more people with more money buying more clothes, and then you have more post-consumer excess. So Asia's got the pre-consumer waste, it's got the post-consumer waste, and it also is the hardest hit by climate change, because 50% of all global greenhouse gas emissions are actually generated within Asia by all manufacturing. That doesn't make Asia wrong, no, because we're all reaping the rewards of the production that happens in Asia.
When we look at fashion waste, a lot of us assume, certainly me, and this is speaking quite honestly, when I think fashion waste, I think post-consumer. I don't think pre-consumer. I don't know why I don't think pre-consumer, because ultimately I know about 40% of everything made for the UK never gets sold. I know how much dead stock's in the world. I know how much is used in that side, but still when I think waste, I think post-consumer. I don't know why. I don't know. I think it's because that's maybe where I'm really thinking and having more conversations now in terms of end of life. It's like I kind of feel that hopefully the pre-consumer side will be rectified, either by retailers and brands ordering what they can sell instead of going for volume discount and ending up with millions of items sat in a warehouse somewhere, not naming any names. But that is a big problem. So it's the volume production of things that don't get sold. But I feel that technology will make the sampling and the production side and actually getting the amount that you need in order to make the right volume. I kind of would hope that pre-consumer would hopefully be helped by technology. But the post-consumer is where we see these massive landfills of clothes that consumers don't really wear. And also I think when we start thinking about circularity, it is a bit of a rabbit hole for me to run down, because I think, well, you have that, but is it because, consumers aren't emotionally connected to their clothes? Is it because they're not lasting as long, they're not as well made? It's like, how do we start to design to reduce that post-consumer side, and what would it take? And it's interesting, as you mentioned infrastructure. And we can talk about infrastructure in the UK in a minute, but have you seen developments, certainly within Asia, as to how they're starting to address that? Has the infrastructure started to be developed quite quickly?
For pre or post or anything? Anything. Well, yes, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, if you look at the China's fashion and textile industry, it is amazing. It's it is the backbone of the world's textile production. So of course there's shredding and recyclers, mechanical and chemical. I'm going to say all over town, because indeed that's true. Gross exaggeration, but of course it's going on. And I've been to factories, by the way. Obviously I'm not going to name, where they've got security inside the factories. barring entry to multiple parts of when I say security, I'm also talking with guns here.
Okay.
Because the IP that's going on inside is so incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, of course, there's infrastructure for recycling globally. I mean, I always think that's the next gold rush. Don't ask me who's raised, which VC's kind of gone into which kind of chemical recycling company, because I cannot remember all the data. But the point is, mechanical recycling is the lion's share, and it's still a joke because of what it does to the fibre, and it obviously damages, etc.
Can I maybe ask you to describe what mechanical is?
Yeah. Okay. So mechanical is, imagine Oliver Twist in an old factory. Yeah. That's mechanical, meaning it's chopped up. And if you have a lovely, lovely cotton fibre, sort of a long staple length, so I'm using my fingers to show a few centimetres, and then you put Oliver Twist in the room, and he chop, and it comes off as a smaller piece of fibre, and then you spin that again. Therefore, the problem is that the staple length has been decreased, and therefore the quality of the yarn is not so good. That's chemical. That's mechanical. Yeah, but the benefits of chemical is that, provided obviously there's a low sort of chemical process in terms of environmental impact, then a chemical process is applied to waste, which should retrieve the fibres in their sort of best form. So it's like extracting, like the chemical kind of utopia of recycling should be to be able to separate cotton from polyester or synthetics, full stop. So how do we disentangle two very different fibres from one another without damaging the other? Yeah. So that would be obviously where we need to go. And there's lots of money going towards that. I mean, the data around the value of textile waste is eye-watering, because you said Mount Everest, and who knows, it's
just a lot.
There's a lot.com, yeah. But the point is, there's also a lot of money that is in textile waste. It's not a very good word, waste, but supposedly Ellen MacArthur report, I think it's the 2017 report, has it that, which is a long time ago, has it that 500 billion USD is lost every year due to clothing underutilization and the lack of recycling. Yeah. And there's a more recent one from BCG last year, or was it? No, it was this year in August, that stated that 150 billion USD value every year from 2023, which is when they recorded that, is lost from the raw material pricing value.
Wow.
150 billion. So there's money to be made from textile waste. But I want to come back to what you said earlier about, when you think of textile waste, you said more around post-consumer. I think it's because it's much more visible. The problem with pre-consumer is that it is invisible to everyone unless that you're working with it. So the companies who have it know about it, but you're not going to find it because it's in warehouses and it's tucked away. It's
you have to dig for it.
It's deep in balance sheets, and it's on the financial audited documents, right? It's there, let me tell you, because we handle it. It is there. And I think so what are the major things that are going to shift this? So many things. But I think from the industry perspective, we've got the understanding of how valuable these materials are, okay? But you still have to unlock the value. It's not like a
quick process.
No, but then we've got legislation coming, which absolutely is changing the way that businesses manage their excess stock and materials. So that's fantastic. So I think that the industry, and by the way, the beauty of what the industry has, even if they can't see it themselves, is that at least they know what their materials are. They ought to, on their inventory management list, they should know what the fibre types are, which means that they ought to be able to better recycle. So that's a win. However, if we just jump to that post-consumer, the picture of Everest, the picture of Accra in Ghana, the picture of post-consumer all over the place. And I actually went to Accra a couple of months ago to the All Foundation because I thought I really just want to kind of sit on that beach. I want to go around and see those informal landfills that are full of our Western, or global North to be more accurate, cast-offs. And so I spent a week there, and it was such a brilliant experience because I am a pig in you-know-what in textile waste, but I didn't like being a pig in that sort of waste because there is so much of it and it is so disgusting, meaning the kind of just the gluttony of our overconsumption, and we all do it. You do it, I do it. So I'm not going to point fingers. It's because it's like we're all doing it.
Our entire industry is set up for more. I think there was a report from McKinsey, I think it was in their State of Fashion last year, that said something along the lines of majority of C-level executives believe only volume will drive profits.
Okay, but I'm not going to argue with McKinsey nor you. I would never argue with you, but
But you could. I don't mind. But I think it's that. I think just that general view, and the reason I said it was that I think the majority of people believe the way to make more profits is to sell more stuff to more people.
And that is indeed true. I'm not going to deny that. However, I would say, and again, I'm really biased about which data I pick up.
Yeah.
If it suits my needs, I'll take it. So this one's a good one because the 4 business models of repair, remake, rent, and resale the 4 business models have the ability to decouple revenue from the use of materials.
Yeah.
And that market between now and 2030, forgive me, I think it's set to raise, I'm going to say 73%. We'll have to put it in the show notes. But the point is...
This could be a long one.
Yeah, the point is that those business models are supposed to...
They're exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I think it is exciting, and I think we're in the process of completing a report at the moment, which is around how do you make more money producing the same or less. And actually there are companies that are doing that, and they've done it through efficiencies. But it is also the way you communicate with your consumer on durability. Are you designing for reuse? Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at those 4 business models that you mentioned, like that's where the innovation is. Mm-hmm. Jack Stratton, who usually co-hosts this with me, he sent me a message. He's talking at the event in a few months, and he said, I want to do something on resale. There's something really exciting happening there. And when he gets excited about it, it's like, I can't wait till January. You're going to need to tell me sooner. But it's like that's where the innovation is. I think that's where a lot of people who have a lot of passion are saying, right, these are the business models where if we crack this, it's going to make impact. Mm-hmm. But it's where do you start? What excites you most in those models?
I think repair and resale. Because I think from a business perspective, they are the sort of lowest hanging fruit for profitability. Yeah. And that's coming out of the horse's mouth, because I've spoken to some very big retailers on that. I won't name who, but very, very big ones. And the reason why repair is a good one is because it also offers the sort of longevity, customer loyalty, the relationship. So that's a good one. And resale, well, I mean, if you read those ThreadUp reports, it seems like the future of the entire planet is resale. I think it's because they say that it's going to outpace luxury, it's going to outpace everything. It's outpacing,
I think somebody said to me a little while ago that secondhand is the new fast fashion, and you would hope that could be true. Because that is the resale market. And I think there's been a lot of reports around how people are now spending, especially younger consumers, are spending more on their clothes because they know they can sell them at the end of it.
Absolutely. And it's also helping to inform the design stage as well, actually. Or rather, it's helping to inform consumers of luxury because they can immediately see what the
resale value is.
But I want to tell you this funny project I'm doing. It's a silly one. I have done a lot of silly things in
but
my
you know
life.
what? You learn a lot from the silly ones.
Yeah. Well, I've done quite a few. So my current one,
Go on.
and then I'll tell you some of the other ones if you want. But my current ones, when I went to Ghana just now, I bought a bale of dresses that had come from the UK originally. So they had come from different charity shops and real end of life from the UK. And so I brought them back. I did take them on the airplane, lots of carbon, sorry for that. But now what I'm doing is I've put them on Depop and I'm trying to sell them back to the UK. So I'm doing a project. No one on Depop knows that this is indeed where they came from. But I'm trying to prove that the very same clothes that were discarded from the UK, that were sent to
Somebody
Ghana,
can resell them.
that people here in the UK will still buy them. It's a bit of a slog. That's one of them. And then I did another project where I only...
I've heard crazier projects.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think that's quite an interesting one because it is actually just proving that point that waste isn't always waste. It's just you've got to a point where nobody wants to deal with it anymore.
Yeah. And that's part of our problem because cheap is... Honestly, some of these dresses, I'm selling them like £3 each. You can't even... how much is a coffee these days?
£6.10 if you're buying it from Starbucks.
Okay, well, I mean, that's...
it's insane.
So I think we are completely... our brains have gone to sort of mushy pea,
I think one of the campaigns that we're running for next year, which I feel quite passionate about, is about rehumanising fashion. I think people have forgotten how fashion's made. And I always say this, when I talk to people in fashion, they always look at me and go, you crazy? It's like, no, ask somebody who doesn't work in fashion where their clothes come from. They'll tell you a factory. Ask them what happens in that factory And I'd be surprised if one of them doesn't use the phrase automation. You know, fashion factories are not car factories. Fashion factories are 95% of them are probably women at machines hand making those garments. Now, if you understand that everything that you wear is all probably completely handmade, unless you're in athleisure and they've got this big circular knitting machines and some crazy manufacturing techniques. But if you then accept that everything you wear is handmade, why would you not question why something only costs £2 or £3 when you're buying it new? Like, at what stage will the consumer care that it's made by somebody in Cambodia earning $230 a month, working 16 hours a day, at least 6 days a week? And I think it's for us, we work predominantly with manufacturers, and it's kind of like, right, okay, so how are you storytelling? How are retailers storytelling the fact that this is handmade? Because if people know something's handmade, generally there's an impression they might pay a bit more. But it's about, I think, getting consumers to really ask questions.
Okay, but can we talk about greenwashing?
Yeah, I'm happy to do this one. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Okay, so I've got a bit of a weird view on it. You wouldn't, being a sustainable fashion advocate, obviously I'm very much pro-transparency, that goes without saying. Yeah. And, authenticity and truthfulness. I mean, obviously, this is called the honest. What's this called?
Honest, not perfect.
Oh, this is an honest but not perfect argument I'm going to make now. I think and then I don't know what your views are, but if I try to get to the point, is that I promote the legislation to stop greenwashing. Yeah. I say yes, absolutely. We cannot have these false claims or claims that are unsubstantiated flying around and possibly influencing consumers to buy stuff that is not true. However, this is my problem. Because of that, what we're seeing at the big brands and small brands and all brands is terror.
It's green bashing.
Yeah.
It's like you call it greenwashing. I'll say.
Okay, go on. What's your point?
So, I think some brands misrepresent themselves on purpose. I think there are definitely people who understand if they put a sustainability tint or they highlight one thing that they do that's really well and run with it, that, consumers, if they understand something is better made or they believe it is, then they will pay more. And I think there are many brands who've said or given the perception that they're a bit more sustainable, whatever that means, than they are. But I think what that has meant is that consumers have lost trust. And because of the reputational damage around making unsubstantiated claims, it makes people terrified. But also, and this is where I think green bashing comes into it, and I'll get to my point in a second, there are some brands and some retailers, Primark, for example, who are doing some really, really good things. They are never going to come out and say what they're doing and how they're doing it, because the minute they do, somebody will point at them and go, but you're fast fashion, you're the problem. So actually, when you start delving into some of the challenges, like there's some really big systemic problems in fashion. If you're a sustainability purist, you'll say, well, you can't produce anything new. It's like, well, if you don't produce anything new, you'll put millions of people out of work who need that employment. So that cannot be the answer. And I think what we need to do, and I think one of the biggest challenges in fashion, is that we have to have people talking openly about what they're doing so people can learn. In other industries, there is that open knowledge sharing. You're not going to get everything right, but people don't point at you for doing 3 things right and saying, oh, but you're doing that one thing really badly. And I think that's part of the challenge, is that I think greenwashing or green bashing and reputational risk has stopped real, conversation in the industry between some of these companies who are, as much as they say they are collaborating, and maybe not doing it as fully or as openly, which means that everybody is starting from ground zero. They're not taking advantage of the great technology or the great process or something that somebody has learned that's actually made something move forward for them. Like, everybody's constantly redoing their own work. And we talk about cooperation. M. Brown are a really good example of this. I love what they're doing. They wouldn't. He would talk about this. Their view is that. Yeah, but actually, do you know what? I think it's a great point of view. What they're doing at the moment is they think that as a retailer or a big brand, they have a responsibility to amplify smaller projects to get them to commercial scale. It could be in materials, but they pick their projects, and then when they get it to a scale or where they've got it to a point where it's commercially viable, they open source it. It's like, learn from it. And I think that's the kind of attitude that we need. So come in my roundabout point, I think greenwashing is a problem. I think it's stopping I think it's eroded consumer trust, and I think there has to be some standardisation, and I feel like the CMA and the ASA should have gotten involved in this years ago to define the language of sustainability in a way that consumers can trust. And I think the reputational risk and damage has stopped some retailers and people who are making real progress from being open about that and sharing that knowledge for fear that somebody will point to everything they're not doing. So I think we did a report on it a little while ago about transparency, and our whole kind of point around this was you have to start being transparent to hold yourself to account, not only for your own business, but for your consumers. And one of the things that we'll often see in an annual report, and you probably delve into this because you look at the post-waste, is you see different goals each year, but you rarely see how they performed to last year's goals if they failed. And what I would love to see, and I would respect a brand who did this, and I think most people would do, is if somebody said, this is the goal we set last year, we did not do this, but this is what I learned from it. We're still trying to crack this. It's still important to us from an ESG perspective, but these are the challenges that we're finding. And that would hold so much more weight to many people for brands to just almost admit this isn't an easy process. We are still trying, but we're not going to ignore it. Whereas some people think you just shut the door and move on.
Well, I agree with everything that you just said.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll give you another one, green hushing. So we said green washing, green bashing. Green hushing is the result that, companies, not people, have gone silent on the great work that they do. Yeah. And I think one thing is that what really, really annoys the hell out of me is that circularity is doing so badly, all right? It came into our sort of conference vernacular, if you call it that, in about 2012, 13, 14, and now it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it because it is so important. Got that. But we're not achieving it. Now, I'm kind of okay with that, sort of, because apparently today, 0.3% of the global textile industry is circular. 0.3%. So we are doing terribly badly. However, that doesn't mean that we should stop trying. Yeah. And why I'm saying that is because circularity is, okay, I'm going to say, this is how I explain it to my kids. It's a team sport. Yeah. I'm a bit stupid, I've got to be honest with you, honestly. I'm really stupid. I have to think in pictures, all right? So circularity is so confusing, my goodness. Although Primark made it simple. I'll come back to that in a minute if I remember. But the problem with circularity is that each of the collectors, the sorters, the spinners, the chemical recyclers, the mechanical recyclers, the yarn buyers, the merchandisers, the designers, they've all got to be ready to do it at the same time. And the problem is that waste is all over the world. Yeah. It's in the wrong countries compared with the infrastructure. You can't move it, you can't sort it, there's no money for it. And basically investment is very slow because if it were a team sport, you need every team member to be ready to rock and roll, fit, fed, ready, fuel in the tank. And the problem is we just don't have that. And so you're having investors who might say, oh, there's a spinning facility. They sound great. Or, oh dear, the sourcing and the supply is not ready. So you get the point that the reason that we're failing is because it's so complicated, but we shouldn't stop trying to win.
No. Yeah. And I think the point is that 0.3% probably sounds like a very small amount, but actually it's a huge step forward in what there would have been a few years ago.
Well, I don't know actually. That's way too optimistic. 0.3 for me is absolutely flatliningly useless. And even,
do you think it is the joining up of those different parts that's delaying it, or do you think just lack of legislation?
I think it's definitely both, because I think the two go hand in hand. When you legislate, people, it's like
it's the stick rather than the carrot. Yeah. I feel like in a lot of our legislative in our governments, specifically UK, it's just been so hands-off. Let it regulate itself; it'll be fine.
But there's a reason for that. Yeah, because legislation, when it, and I'm no expert, okay, but from what I really understand, having spoken to lots of industry players about this, is legislation is obviously everyone goes legislate, do it, come on, but you have to be able to regulate. The legislation, and the problem is because it's such a fragmented, and I'm saying it so obviously it's a fragmented, ridiculously complicated industry, and it's not easy to regulate.
Yeah, so, I think one of the interesting parts is the EPR legislation, the circularity legislation coming in from Europe, and I think what I believe will start to get this moving in the right direction is when those millions of pieces of items that are in warehousing all of a sudden become classed as waste and they're taxed. And that is coming. And I think at the moment it's just a depreciating asset people can forget about. But if you've got 12 or 13 million items sitting in warehousing somewhere in the UK, that's a big tax bill that's about to happen to you. And I think that is what will force change to move quicker, because I think, I mean, outside of, I don't think in the UK we've had a significant piece of legislation around end of life and textile waste for quite a long time.
Yeah, there was that Fixing Fashion 2019 which failed. It was the
and I think also, I'm not going to talk about this one, I think actually leaving the EU and the movements they were making on circular kind of economy and some of the legislative points there, I think made us take a huge step back. And I think people will always say, come back to, well, if we legislate, it's going to cost money to transform, it's going to be less profitable, it's going to put businesses at risk. Actually, this is a problem that we do need to solve. And I think going back to what you said around the people, it will impact climate change. This mass amount of textile waste has to go somewhere. And I think the technology solutions are a few years away, unless there is a legislative point that means that companies have to deal with it. Because I think we've waited a little bit too long, and we have the same conversation every year. 2030 is just around the corner. When is action going to happen? And we spend so much time talking about it. It's like, when is something going to happen? When is there going to be a movement forwards? And I now think it's legislation.
It's definitely legislation as I experience it, because obviously, so the Redress is the non-profit that I founded. Then I started the R Collective, which is a social impact business that works with luxury fashion brands and global businesses on their excess materials. And I can tell you in real time that of our customers who I can't speak about because it's all under NDA, because of the EU banning the destruction of recyclable goods, unsold goods that are recyclable, we're seeing the uptick in the need for recycling services in real time. And therefore, in my 18-year career doing this, it's very interesting to see when legislation is enacted that action actually follows that. And it's happening right now. So I'm more optimistic about that. But I wanted to come back to data. As we know, the data in the fashion industry is absolutely rubbish, so this might be rubbish too. However, apparently we make 100 billion garments a year or 150 billion garments a year. That's like my biggest bugbear. However, regardless of what is true, supposedly 2.5 billion to 5 billion items of clothing are not sold every year.
I believe that. I completely believe that. In fact, I think it could be higher, because when we talk to retailers, obviously off the record, quite quietly, it's like, it used to be estimated it was about 40%. I mean, if you imagine 40% of everything that's sold that's made for the UK isn't sold to the UK, that's a crazy amount. 40% of everything, and then we buy 62 billion pounds worth of fashion a year in the UK. Yet we've still got another 40% made for that. Like, that's insane. That's an extra 20 billion of clothes that are just sat in warehousing. Like, where does that go? How do we bring that back in?
And that's exactly why I wanted to say that about your EPR point, which is that, tucked away in warehouses all over the world is stock. Yeah. And it has to be, you can't hide that under the carpet anymore.
No.
It's going to come out. And I don't mean come out into the consciousness of the media and consumers. It's got to come out into the recycling system, which is great. So we can use those valuable materials and the fibres that are embedded in and the packaging. There's so much good stuff in warehousing that can unlock the circular economy. So I'm really, really excited about that. I want to tell you the story. You asked me about resale and repair being business models that I am excited about for so many reasons. But I want to quickly tell you this thing that happened to me in about 2008, whatever. We organised this conference in Hong Kong, and we got the government to speak. And, I was literally a little baby in nappies right then, trying to work out this thing. And I couldn't believe that a government person was going to come and speak. And I was moderating, and I was going to hit her up with some really hard sort of, what's the government doing about legislation type questions. And here she comes. She walks up on stage. I can't remember her name. And when she was talking about sustainability, she was talking about her repairing her own dress, her skirt. And I thought, what a waste of valuable time. How dare you come up on stage? I wanted to talk about hard-hitting stuff, not you repairing your skirt. Why I say that is that she stayed in my brain because ultimately repair is such an important armory that businesses can benefit and also consumers can benefit. And I think coming back to repair, it is something that will be legislated for increasingly in terms of clothes that are repairable. With the ESPR, one of the eco-design directives is that, or requirements rather, is that clothes have to be repairable. And obviously, and again, repair enhances the emotional durability. I'm speaking to the converted here. But do you think anyone's going to go and buy a nail, a
needle and thread?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know what? I think I repair my own clothes. Finally taught my husband to sew a button onto a shirt, which is like happy days. He can hem his cricket whites and that's about it. But I think we've lost those skills. And I grew up with my grandparents, and my nan used to she had a sewing machine, and she knitted and she crocheted. And there was a running joke for quite a long time that I have some very old lady hobbies. But, I can crochet, I can knit, and I can sew, and I can embroider. And it's what I was taught when I was growing up. And I'm not that old. It's like an 80s and 90s baby. But somewhere along the line, those skills have been forgotten. It's like it's not something that we do. And I actually do feel that if we embedded repair and made that normal again, actually our younger generations probably would do that, especially if they know if something's repaired, then they can resell it and get a little bit more money for it.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that there is kind of reports that show that if you were paying for your repairs and not doing it yourself at home, that no one will spend more than 30% of the retail price on a repair job, and therefore therein lies the problem that most clothes have obviously depreciated. Yeah.
What do you think is the retailer model? Because I've had a few conversations around this, around how retailers make repair either an experience or they make it a profitable part of their business. Do you think there's who's doing that well at the moment?
Well, I wish I'd read up on this, because I actually was thinking about it last week, because Redress just did a collab with Lululemon in Hong Kong.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I wish you'd asked me this last week. I could have given you some good data on that.
It's okay, we can move on.
Yeah. Although the missing piece of the puzzle in your question, or the missing ROI, is the customer loyalty, and I just don't think that retailers. So I'll give you my broken trousers, you give them back next week, and you've repaired them for me. And obviously a lot of brands are doing that. I contribute to the fee, whatever, of the repairs. However, how much did you win my loyalty? And I don't think the ROI on that is yet clear.
I think in smaller businesses it's maybe easier. So I've spoken about, I love Black Horse Lane. I think they do great things. My husband is a dedicated jeans buyer. He doesn't buy that many, but they're expensive. It's like £300 for a pair of jeans. But it's woven into the story that if they start to wear through, you bring them back and they repair it for free. He's taken them back twice for repairs, and guess what? Every time he goes there, he buys something else. But it was built in at point of sale. And these are long-lasting quality pieces of clothes. So he's got an emotional connection to it, but also he knew when he bought that was an investment piece, which is what I usually say to him when I'm buying a handbag. It's an investment piece, it's something that'll last for ages, but he now knows the names of the people who work in that store. And I think, I sometimes wonder for retailers, for example, like our larger retailers, the ROI maybe isn't there because the piece of clothing in the first place is quite small, but is there an experience and a loyalty play in teaching those people who care how to repair their own clothes? If it's a simple stitch, if it's a hem, if it's a button, and almost the selling is maybe a little repair kit that they take away. And I sometimes wonder with repair, I think I'm really curious to see where it goes as a business model. But I think there is an experience play there with our larger retailers to teach people to do it themselves. And I think that's what I would love to see how that plays out. I'd love to see how people make that profitable, whether or not they use it as a skills and development piece with, tie-ins with fashion universities so that students coming through can get paid, but also some experience and actually make that an experience or something that is part of that journey. So I think repair is something that I'm fascinated by, how a big retailer does that at scale, how they can make it profitable, even just break even. And I think profit is an interesting one because people say, it's like a dirty word. It's like, no, you need to make it profitable so you can reinvest and scale and grow.
But is it a dirty word? I mean, who says it's a dirty word?
I've spoken to a few sustainability,
I think profit is gorgeous.
Do you?
Yeah, it shows that something works.
But it does, and that's the thing is that, and I think this is key to fashion really, is that profit isn't a dirty word. Everyone knows that you need to make money doing it, but it's where you spend it and invest it. And if you're a larger brand that is making quite a lot of profit, and a lot of them do, it's like how are you investing into those circular schemes? How are you looking at your design?
That is a different question. Profit is great, and ethics is another thing.
Yeah.
So they should go together in an ideal world.
I think one of the talking points that I wanted to talk to you about, because I know we're both quite probably passionate about education. And I think one of the interesting conversations that's come out of a lot of the people that I've spoken to over the last few years is how long sustainability people stay in their job. And how long does it take somebody to come out of university with all of these principles and go into a big business and all of a sudden realise that their principles come second to profit. I always say profit's the big P in the people and planet. And usually it's like the people and the planet is a little bit further down. And it's like you come out with these great ideals and you want to make change and move things forward. Do you think there are larger businesses that do nurture that talent coming through, or how do you think we can help them keep those principles in order to drive change?
I am very gushy and gooey because I believe that the big businesses want to do the right thing and they would rather do a circular product and they'd rather it be more sustainable. It's not always easy, so it's not like this is an easy battle to win, if we could call it a battle. So why I'm saying that is that I personally think that businesses would be really excited to have more sustainably minded professionals joining them. I don't think that anyone's trying to bash that enthusiasm out of them. It's just that I
think we speak to different people. But it's nice to, because I know that you will speak to people at a different level, probably at an executive level.
Yeah, I maybe I'm a bit stupid about the profit bit, because maybe the fat cats are just buying more Ferraris, and not leaving the margin in the product for the innovation that we need. And can I just say what really annoys me of many things, and then we can come back to these students in a minute, these fresh grads, but R&D. This is a major, and I want to swear, and I'm not going to, major problem.
You can, people have.
I'm trying to give up swearing. It's what me off big time is that the average fashion brand's annual revenue that is put back into R&D is 0.9%.
Wow.
And the car industry is about 15%.
If you think of pharmaceuticals, it's even higher.
They've got a complicated,
Well, they've got a complicated supply problem, but it's interesting because the pharma philosophy is fail fast, fail early. So they do a lot of things, but also they know it's going to take a long time for them to find the solution to a problem they're trying to solve medically. And I kind of feel in some ways maybe, and I'm just thinking about this for the first time, I'm wondering if actually within fashion and design and materiality it's the same thing. There's so much innovation that needs to happen that you almost need to be invested in those levels in order to hit there's something that can solve your problem for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why a lot of the big businesses have their sort of M&A and their investment portfolios into these kind of next gen, whatever they are. But I think the problem with that is that fashion C-suite, let's just say, and I'm not speaking to everyone because this sounds so rude. In general, I prefer private companies than public companies for their ability to make a decision and stay with the decision for the obvious reasons of, performance-driven sort of KPIs that CEOs have to meet, and that's the world. Like, let's just not sit around here pretending we live in the real world here. But here, the point is that we're not putting enough into R&D. Fashion brands are lazy.
Yeah. As a percentage, what would you like to see that be?
5. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, it's a lot of money, but in comparison to what change that could drive. Yeah,
and I know one Erdos Group, and I don't work for them, we don't get paid for them, I'm not trying to plug them, but I know Erdos Group is a China group. They've got 5 brands under their group. And I know because I asked them, how much do you spend on your R&D? Because they're big on cashmere. And they said 5%. That's why I'm going with 5%.
Because if it's possible for everyone.
Yeah.
No, I always think that 5% number. I've been talking to people recently about UK manufacturing and how little is made here. And one of the stats that I was most shocked by was, according to the Office of National Statistics, there are less than 400 manufacturers left in the UK who employ more than 15 people. Yeah. And when you look at these numbers, if you delve into it, then I think they said it's about 3,700 officially, but that employ more than 15 people. Leicester, as a sector, employed, I think they had 17. I found this from Jenny Holloway at the ATMF, so I'm going to give her a plug. She told me there were 1,700 manufacturers in Leicester in 2018 employing 15,000 people, and now there are less than 200. Yeah. And when we talk about what would it take to change, it's like if only 5% of what brands produced was made in the UK, it would transform the industry. Yeah. It by a long way.
It's quite sad, that, isn't it, really?
Yeah. But again, it goes to where are brands making their clothes? It's like, what is the thing that is driving them to make in Asia? Yes, it is low unit costs, its efficiencies, and China is amazing at making fashion, and they have some amazing factories, and the way they are set up is so efficient that it is hard to compete with. But we have skills in the UK. And actually, when we talk about some of the places where we will solve, hopefully, some of the technology challenges or some of the collaboration, if UK brands worked with UK-based businesses, maybe that would work a little bit faster. Maybe I'm being a little bit gushy or a bit optimistic. But it's funny how that number of 5%, if brands reinvested 5% of their profit into R&D, materiality and process improvement, how quickly would that move? And same for if you made 5% of what's sold in the UK, what could that do to UK industry? And it doesn't sound like a lot. And if you said it to consumers, they would say 5% doesn't sound a lot. Why can't we do that? And the answer is, it's probably a very complicated question, but if we don't put it out there as a statistic or say it's 5% would change such a huge amount, it's like, why can't we move towards that? What do you think it would take?
To have 5% in the UK?
Do you think it would take, or even that 5% invested in R&D?
Oh, magic wand.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Big stick.
I just don't. I mean, to the made in the UK perspective, I would say consumers responding very positively to that which is already made here.
Yeah, and they do. I think made in the UK is one of the few things that, there's always that do say gap. And I heard Mintel run a really great presentation on the things that consumers say and what they do and the gap between. But I think for things that are genuinely made in the UK, people would pay more because people ultimately still want to support their local communities.
Yeah, but so forget the UK for a moment. The China brands, don't ask me the exact stats on this, but we're seeing more nationalism in multiple countries around the world. I mean, US is the obvious one, China. But also Chinese consumers are buying more of domestic Chinese brands.
Yeah.
Because it's a nationalist pride, and it's in that situation it could also be a heritage cultural thing. So, if Brits were happy, they should be buying, made in the UK.
Yeah. And I would like to think that when we talk about transparency, and I think some of the work around the digital product passport is quite exciting. I think consumers are curious about where their clothes are made. And I think once you see something, you can't necessarily unsee it. But I wonder how much that will push into the consumer consciousness. Like how many of these people who say it's designed in the UK, once somebody scans it, what would that do to erode their consumers' trust? Because I think people see the UK on something and they think, oh, it's made here. They don't necessarily understand the difference. Like, as a really good example, it's big retail. I'm not going to name and shame them, but it had in big letters on their label, it said designed in the UK. And then on the little tag underneath, it said made in, and that's all you could see. And then you had to literally look on the back and see China. And it's like, you know what? It's not, again, consumers know that everything generally is made in China or Asia. But just be more transparent about it. And again, if we manage to get this 5% stat into consumer consciousness, it's like you don't have to have everything. It could just be one range. It could be one part of a range.
About 10 years ago, I read a book, whatever it was called back then, and the book's probably called the same thing, but I can't remember it. But it said that one way to deal with this problem is to train US consumers to put their hand deeper into their pocket and pay 3 or 4% more for products. And it's the same, if people want to buy from the UK, they're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And people are so mean.
I think in some ways they are mean, and I think one of the glossy parts of this is we can say some people will pay more for the things that they really want. There is also a reality check that people have less.
Cannot.
They can't.
Yeah.
And then maybe the rise of kind of resale or vintage will give that level of consumer a lot more options, but ultimately we all want the same thing. We want to feel great in our clothes.
Yeah, but those with more disposable income can.
Yeah.
It's not everybody. Some people are on the bread and butter line, and they're absolutely cannot afford. Fair enough. But we're not all the same type of fashion consumer, and those. Yeah.
And I think, again, bearing in mind, I think the growing number of consumers who are looking at items for resale and that resale cost means that they will spend a little bit more. But I wonder how much more do you think could be done by brands to storytell to help customers understand why they're paying more for something?
Yeah, but that's coming back to our point about greenwashing. Because if you want to storytell that this is, unless it's secondhand, in which case it's easy or reloved, you don't need to substantiate that. So, the storytelling is so important. I was just at Climate Week, just gone. And storytelling was like the rage. Everyone was talking about storytelling. And I didn't really realise that fashion is basically a rather dull product, but it's all about how does the
How does it
storytelling.
make you feel?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really kind of big on storytelling because things come in phases and fads. So this is what I'm hearing a lot at the moment. And so my point around that is that there's the aesthetics, and then there's the purpose and the meaning and the sustainability and the values that are embedded in the product, for example. But because of all of this very tight anti-greenwashing legislation, which again we believe in, it's very difficult to tell the sustainability story without possibly being chucked into a prison.
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to the guys at the CMA, they would say that their intention in this is not to find somebody 10% of their profits or something globally is what they can do without actually taking them down a legal process. It's like they can actually just enforce. So I think that is obviously set the cat amongst the pigeons, but what their aim is ultimately to do is not to catch people out, but to help start to build consumer trust in what they buy, to help them start to believe the claims. And I think there was an amazing store that I went to when I was in Norway earlier on this year, and it was all kind of locally made. And sewn into the labels of these amazing woolen jumpers was the person's face of who'd made it. And I absolutely loved it. And this jumper was like £350 and I almost bought it.
Yeah.
And I almost bought it because I could see who'd made it. And I wonder how much I really hope people do embrace the QR codes when the digital product passports come through, because I think giving people the full transparency on when those clothes, that's going to help with the storytelling and the greenwashing, because for the first time people can really see where their clothes have come from. But there was I can't remember her surname, Dr. Rosie, she's up at the University of Manchester. I watched a presentation from her, and she's done a load of research into how can we build trust into labels in fashion. And the thing that gained the most traction was the traffic light system that we have on food. She said that consumers get, and actually that would be one of the easiest ways to start to build trust. Now, how you build those different 4 or 5 little things. She said, but that is one of the few things that they trust if they see something on a piece of food and it's got these like green amber. So I think it's interesting how brands and retailers will approach that and what the opportunities are there.
I'm going to say something else, if I may. And I feel like we've been in here for hours, so I don't know if anyone's still listening, but anyway, here we go. I've got one more thing to say.
We'll wrap up in a minute.
Yeah, just tell me to shut up. But post Rana Plaza, which obviously, it was the worst industrial collapse with 1,231, if I correctly remember every life that obviously went down with Rana Plaza in 2013. According to a UBS research that came out in 2020, 2019-ish, something like that, there is no evidence that there has been a prolonged negative ESG impact from a negative catastrophe, Rana Plaza, as it relates to the amount of clothes that people buy. What I'm saying that is that we saw dead people sort of in rubble with blood coming out of their faces and their nostrils. I mean, the most visceral, painful, disgusting imagery of garment workers who had died. And yet, of course, the Who Made My Clothes campaign, incredible, that was born so sadly from that. But we are goldfishes because post that, there's no evidence of any decrease in consumption due to an ESG shock.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, you can scan and have all the traffic lights you want in your clothes, but most people don't actually care.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
And I think that goes back to why we're building a campaign around rehumanising fashion, because that's one tragedy. Most people will know if they're paying £1 for something from Shein or Temu, it costs more than that. And so in order for something to be that cheap, there is a human cost to it. Consumers don't care because they will get it cheap.
Yeah.
And I think at some point there has to be that reconciliation between, there's got to be a point where people say, you know what, this just isn't good.
Well, what they say is in terms of raw materials, we cannot make clothes any cheaper because, in fact, the raw materials are inflationary. And I'm no economist, but basically what I understand is that we can't get raw materials cheaper.
Yeah, and it's not going to get any cheaper.
It's getting worse because of the
climate
change.
Crisis. Where does that material? Well, cotton is still grown in fields, in environments where they're incredibly susceptible. So cotton prices as a commodity and commodity prices in general will just continue to increase. So
the only way we can get cheaper clothes is through squeezing social, because we have squeezed raw material pricing to death, and it ain't getting no cheaper. That's a double negative, which makes it positive. You get my point.
But coming back to that, and this is one of the things that we're most excited about with Source Fashion and where we develop, is that virgin materials and pricing is not going to get any cheaper. So let's start looking at the commodities that we already have, which is fashion, textile waste.
Yes, exactly. Back to the beginning.
There we go.
Circular economy. You, me and you.
Right, last question, Christina. I've probably already covered this one. And I ask this to everyone. What excites you most about what you're doing right now?
I'm really excited about textile waste reduction and circularity right now because it is something that's the cat's out of the bag, that we need to deal with it. And having been involved in it for 18 years, when people, companies, ESG, the finance, the C-suite, we're not so interested in it now. Textile waste is hot news. So I'm excited about that.
Sounds like a good place to finish that. Well, that has flown by. Thank you so much for joining us. I think there's so much to unpack in that for people, but I think the key thing is that the issues around textile waste are now coming to the surface, and it's an exciting place to play. So thank you.
It's been fun, thanks.
You're welcome.